Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to Horticulture New Zealand for inviting me to speak with you today. Can I also acknowledge fellow speaker John Palmer here in the audience? I also want to take this opportunity to talk to you about that one genuine concern that you have, New Zealand's biosecurity system, because it's also a great opportunity for me to challenge some of the exaggerated allegations about our biosecurity system. Let's start with your own industry magazines, which in this month's issues clearly have an axe to grind with New Zealand's biosecurity system. Reporting industry concerns is one thing, but filling pages with every negative angle possible and affording little opportunity for response in reply is unbalanced reporting of the worst kind. And it is disappointing to me, especially when the government and I have taken every opportunity to work with your President and Chief Executives on these issues impacting your industry. I recently met with Andrew and your board to discuss your industry's concerns about biosecurity. In May, we invited Andrew to bring whomever he wanted to go behind the airports at Auckland and have a look at the inner workings to see firsthand the biosecurity system as it actually works. As a result of that visit, this comment is in your magazine from Andrew himself, and I quote, "The commitment and dedication of the frontline staff is admirable and gives me greater confidence that the interests and risks to growers are paramount to the biosecurity operations." But then the magazines go on to feature 4 articles that run what I consider is the best biosecurity system in the world to run it into the ground. I'm aware that yesterday some of you took the opportunity to visit ITOC, the multi-agency facility, to see firsthand how we actually do target and detect risk at the border. In short, this ministry is doing more than its fair share to honestly demonstrate to you as an organisation how the biosecurity system works as a whole. Government takes biosecurity very seriously. It is simply the greatest risk to this economy. And I give you an absolute assurance that it is today and will always be my highest priority. But your campaign should not be ill-informed, emotional cannon fodder promoted to the public domain, because it is far too important for that. Ladies and gentlemen, let's face it, the economic prosperity of an island nation like ours depends on biosecurity. Each year, about $80 billion of imports and exports and more than 10 million passengers cross our borders, and those volumes and figures are going to continue to grow. Today alone, 175,000 items will cross our borders. Despite having some of the most robust systems in the world, and no matter how much we spend or staff, some things will get through. The challenge we face is to get the balance right between facilitating tourism and trade and yet keep New Zealand free and safe from pests and diseases. To do this, we counter biosecurity risk at 3 levels. Firstly, offshore, where we conduct a huge amount of work to reduce the risks posed by goods and people before they even arrive at the New Zealand border. The next level is at the border, and it's not just at the airports. 700,000 shipping containers of cargo pass through our ports every year. That's 2,000 shipping containers a day. With that volume landing at our shores, any suggestion to individually unpack and repack each container at the wharves is totally impractical. If we look at the mail system, nearly 100,000 items of mail arrive each day, and despite interception being like looking for a needle in the haystack, our system last year intercepted over 10,000 biosecurity risks in that mail. And our system at the airports is working. There has been a 45% increase in the use of materials into amnesty bins, where people are consciously disposing of risk items before they cross the border, following the government's decision to double the infringement fine to $400. We have full passenger screening in place for our airports for all passengers except some New Zealanders and Australians travelling to New Zealand. And the reason we do that is because MPI research shows New Zealand or Australian travellers pose up to 9 times less risk than travellers from other parts of the world. Now, I know you have a session later on today with Roger Smith and his team, so he's going to use that to expel some of the myths that are existing around the direct access system. The final level of the system is surveillance and detection. If an exotic pest or disease is detected, like the Queensland fruit fly in Auckland earlier this year, a sophisticated system of response swings into action. MPI sets more than 7,500 traps each year for the early detection of Mediterranean fruit fly, Queensland fruit fly, Oriental fruit fly, and other species like that respond to lures. By detecting the presence of fruit fly this way, MPI can move to eradicate as quickly as possible, and that's what you saw happening in Auckland recently. An immediate response was initiated when that fly was detected in one of the surveillance traps. We now know that it was a single male fruit fly, and the response was stood down after 14 days of intensive surveillance and response activities. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that cost MPI $1.5 million to deal with one dead Queensland fruit fly, but that is the reality of a response. Yet, ironically, Horticulture New Zealand, the industry good body that stood to lose the most if that outbreak had occurred, went public to complain about that cost. Your very own commissioned report estimates that if Mediterranean fruit fly was to establish, it would cost your industry up to $110 million to the Bay of Plenty alone. The fact that MPI managed to ensure no adverse market reactions to that particular fruit fly find reaffirmed to me that our trading partners have absolute confidence in our trading system, in our biosecurity system. Again, ironic, isn't it, that our trading partners have more confidence in our biosecurity system than a New Zealand industry good body does. Ladies and gentlemen, New Zealand does have the best biosecurity system in the world, but it will always need improving because things and challenges are changing. I challenge you that your own business risk systems will always remain static. Of course they won't. It simply isn't reality. This government wants to work with industry to boost biosecurity preparedness and response activities, and the Government Industry Agreements Initiative is an example of that work. GIAs are about achieving better biosecurity for New Zealand through government and willing primary industries working together. Only last week in Parliament we promoted a change to the Biosecurity Bill to extend GIA partnerships so that they now include engagement on all aspects of the biosecurity system. It's not about government cutting its financial commitment to biosecurity. In fact, New Zealand's investment in biosecurity is the highest it's been in the last decade, and it's almost double the annual spend of what it was in 2001. Horticulture New Zealand has signed on to the GIA initiative. This will lead to your industry having more say in readiness and response activities that do directly affect you. It gives your industry the opportunity to identify the biosecurity risks of greatest concern to your industry and to jointly work with government to manage those risks. As Andrew mentioned, your own Chief Executive, Peter Silcock, is one of 13 members on the Independent Biosecurity Ministerial Advisory Committee. This committee is free of officials, and it is charged with providing me with independent advice on the performance of the overall biosecurity system. And I assure you that I rely heavily on the advice of that committee to identify to me areas that need improvement and ensure me of the overall integrity of our biosecurity system. Your industry can argue that government is primarily responsible for biosecurity, and I accept that. But in fact, all New Zealanders have a role to play in protecting our island nation. And if we are to make the best decisions, we need the best information. We need the best use of resources, and we need your industry working with government. So my challenge to your board is to engage constructively with MPI. Raise your justified concerns and any relevant criticisms. I expect nothing less. But if your board continues what is an ill-informed crusade, it runs the risk of lowering the credibility of Horticulture New Zealand to government and to government departments. And ladies and gentlemen, that is not a risk that should be taken lightly. Looking ahead, I know you have challenged yourselves to be a $10 billion industry in 2020. While there are a number of actions to reach this goal, a focus on export markets is critical. Opportunities lie in premium, high-value, safe and sustainably produced products that serve the needs of international consumers. Free trade agreements are critical to opening the markets for our food. We have one of the most comprehensive free trade agreements in the world with our Australian neighbours, and we are the first Western country to have an FTA with China. China is now our second largest trading partner, with exports to that country growing by nearly 40% in the last financial year. We are currently engaged in negotiations with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which involves at least 10 countries, including the United States. We are also negotiating with Korea, with Russia, and with India. There is a lot of promise in these markets. This government is seriously committed to accelerating economic growth. The horticultural sector, like all primary sectors, is part of achieving this. I know one of the initiatives you're interested in is the government's Primary Growth Partnership, or PGP program. The PGP allows government to support industries to identify and seize opportunities to add value and access new markets. All PGP programs have common themes, including raising productivity, decreasing costs, raising profits, and adding value to the primary sectors in which they operate. Innovation and adding value to both products and practices will add to New Zealand's reputation as the producer of high-quality products backed by our integrity. In conclusion, I wish you success with your conference. The national-led government is working to clear the barriers to growth facing the horticultural industry. I sincerely hope that you will work alongside us in achieving those goals. It is my pleasure to now declare your 2012 conference officially open. Thank you.